for the last day that I will be known the way that I want them to know me. Rain for reporters, predictable leads on the darkening stain of my name. Rain like the morning you left with the International Brigade. The streak of your face at the glass when the train pulled away. The Aspidistra.
I think the 60s and the 70s, we hit a low spot. We hit bottom in Winnipeg. And I think that fed this psyche that Winnipeg wasn't a great city. And the fact that we were always on the news about crime and poverty made us feel very insecure about our own city.
If you watch a mid-70s movie, that's exactly what was happening here. The prostitutes had the high leather boots, the short miniskirts, the fur jackets.
If you talk to people sort of my generation, if we were to describe what the Exchange District was when we were kids, it was that neighborhood you didn't go to. It's that neighborhood that your parents wouldn't let you go alone into, kind of thing.
In my mind, there was a very conscious decision by artists of that time to situate themselves in a downtown that the kind of mainstream Winnipeg was not interested in. Mm-hmm. So I think you find until even very recently, it was a place that kind of suburban Winnipeg wouldn't really go.
It was around 1984 that things really started moving with the establishment of the Core Area Initiative Agreement.
There was a new federal cabinet minister by the name of Lloyd Axworthy. There was an NDP government who were interested in communities and community development, and a mayor, Bill Norrie, who was kind of interested in everything.
The likes of Jim August pushing for the idea, the minister at the time, Eugene Costera, who was really committed to the arts.
I just felt that there was a need for change, particularly in my part of the city. It needed renewal, renovation. Poverty and issues related to poverty were becoming a problem.
The city was struggling. Their growth was minuscule. I don't think there was that big a problem with jobs and the like, but we weren't growing, so we didn't need to be creating a lot of new jobs. Also, really, the downtown area was continuing to lose its retail sector and its trade and business and the like because they were moving to the burbs.
A lot of things like cinemas were moving out into the suburbs, and the super malls were all developing at that time. Polo Park was there for many years already, but a lot of the others were. And then housing and that was spreading out quite rapidly into the suburbs. And, we're starting to become a bit of a donut city, And
it's not an unusual story for cities. So our mandate was try to bring some revitalization efforts to the downtown and be very specific on projects.
And that was very exciting, but it was also terrifying because many of the arts groups were told that they would no longer be able to afford to be downtown. And so there was a big meeting of all of the arts groups that came in and put together a proposal to purchase the Galt building and create Artspace. After that meeting, I went out for coffee with Joan Jarvis and Shirley Macklin, and Joan and Shirley offered me the job, and so I moved back home, set up an office on my third floor, and the three of us worked up there.
As long as I've been at the Winnipeg Film Group, when I started there was a plan in place to build Artspace, to renovate an historic building and move into it. And so there were frequent meetings about it. There was endless discussion about what do we need, if we move in there, what are the things we're looking for, that kind of thing.
In order to effectively serve the needs of the community, Artspace will be much more than an exhibition space. It will play a greater role in providing other services, many being of an educational nature. It will not only reflect the activity of the arts community, but will also seek to integrate the art experience into the life of the community as a whole.
But there were a whole number of fairly significant projects. This one had a fairly strong voice, Artspace, from a number of community leaders.
There was a really, really great meeting where all the groups met with Eugene And Eugene put on his ministerial kind of cap and said, well, in quite a daunting voice, why should I give you money? You know? And Shirley stood up and said, you know, I am deeply offended that you would ask us that question as the Minister of Culture. You know, how can you even ask that question? You know, this is such an important initiative for this city. It's going to transform downtown. You know, you should be the first person to stand behind us. And you know, and he did this really wonderful about face, of course, because I mean, we all knew he really did support us. And he said, yeah, I know. You know, of course, I support you.
This was just like kind of exciting, you know, having a activity like that coming before me when I was new in government. And, you know, there was a lot of other aspects to the core initiative with housing and with training programs and, you know, and some other bricks and mortar type activities. And this one was, you know, cultural expression was pretty exciting for me to see come together.
We were very keen on it, on the project happening. Actually, I went to my boss then and said, I wasn't heading it up at that time. I was kind of in charge of these community projects. And I was willing to take a leave and just work full time on this thing because it was such a cool idea.
I think that was, you know, one of the things that was kind of remarkable, actually, about it. But it also kind of showed you the power of what can happen when, you know, when a kind of group of people with a common cause come together with a good purpose.
There's enough support around to make it, to actually push it to the next level.
Once the funds were received, plans were drawn up, people were, from the arts community were spoken to, and the vision was secured, and it went from there.
Saying that, once we got it built, we realized we didn't have enough money, and we had some shortage of capital.
The biggest thing we had to figure out was the operating expenses because, you know, it costs a lot to operate an artist center, and those groups had never done that before, and we had to figure out the budget for that, and then there was a gap, and so we needed to go back to government. So it wasn't just, you know, looking for, you know, funding to actually build the building and renovate the building, because there was a little bit of a gap there. The biggest problem was we needed to find operating funds, and operating funds, nobody ever likes to give anybody operating funds because it's a long-term commitment.
The studio was actually shut down for almost 2 years as they went through the renovation process, but so what?
The stressful side was trying to decide when to move our program series into the space, not knowing when the theater would be finished. And I just endlessly ruminated upon it.
It would be an understatement to say that this is an exciting moment in the history of the arts community in Manitoba. And it's an absolutely incredible moment for all of us to be a part of the official opening of Artspace.
Agatha Dick's hats in the lobby. At some point early on, they were hung from the beams, and it was just beautiful. It was wonderful and colorful.
The hat display was the reason that I hung them from the ceiling at a certain height was that the person in the balcony, by looking down, could put these hats on the person that was downstairs. That was such a great, whimsical event. You know, it just kind of caught the spirit of what the building should be about, which was, you know, it was fun, it was really creative, and, you know, it was surprising, and yeah, it was just delightful, I thought, anyway.
There was a lot of, originally there was supposed to be air conditioning here, but they ran out of money, and, you know, a few other odds and ends. When I first started, the elevator wasn't even operating then.
Because there was a lot of things that didn't turn out quite the way they were, and so we had to get them fixed. There was a summer where we had no air conditioning in the Cinematheque. And we had to have people who would stand and hold the door open to the street for 2 or 3 hours. Volunteers just have air come into the theater. And I ran down to Moxley's Rentals and rented 8 floor-length fans and put them all around the inside of the theater, and basically it was like blowing hot air around the room. But eventually then we got air conditioning. So that was very important. But here, there's a letter in the late 80s to the director at the time. Just want to say how much I appreciate your installing heat in the projection booth. A grinding, rattling noise is being given off by a small gray box in the heating grate in the back of the theater. How can we eliminate this noise? The rear exit door is also starting to go off a loud bang. Again, the sound is a bit aggravating. Can we fix this? And of course we did fix these things.
They hired another cleaner to look after the building, but for some reason nobody liked him. So they asked me, and then me and another guy on the painting crew.
I remember Dave Wee because there were a lot of workmen in the building, and as the dust cleared and people left, he was one of the people still hanging around. He knows everything about Artspace. He goes to every office, right, and he checks out because he's checking in every office, and so he hears stories in every office. So he knows everything. I'm serious too.
I'm not that much into art, really, but they're all nice people, and I like coming to work in the morning.
We were very, very early on. The Winnipeg Film Group moved in very, very early on. I think Video Pool moved in early on in terms of their spaces, and they're across the hallway from another. So people who are members of the Film Group and Video Pool, they can go across the hallway and talk to each other.
Again, it was a time when recording was really prohibitive. So there was a real kind of that democratizing the means of production that Video Pool did for Winnipeg artists was incredibly important. I think we forget nowadays where, the technology that was there in 1989 is now, contained in my phone in my pocket, right? But back then it was a real impediment to sharing your music with other people, was getting it recorded somehow. So it was this kind of like, it was a thrill to be there.
There are various films being made in the building. Guy Madden shot part of Tales from the Gimli Hospital in the building. He was in the building. Also, an Archangel was shot. I think he may have filmed some of the things in our studio. There's a short film called Odell on Red On, which is an amazing short film where he had to build a small train. Again, that was in the studio. And then, of course, there's a very famous story, which it's been told in many other cases, where Guy Madden brought a dead seagull into the office, and he had a scene where he had to rub it over somebody's stomach. He said, "Is there any volunteers here?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And so he literally had a dead seagull, and he brought it in, and he put wax on my stomach and rubbed it over, and said, "Do you want us to see your face?" And I said, "Oh, no." And then after the scene was over, I ran into the washroom and splashed hot water all over my stomach because I thought I'd picked up some strange bird disease. That's a true story. So from film group history, that was extremely important, I think, that studio.
Cinematheque was, again, you have to remember how difficult it was to find great cinema in Winnipeg in those days. So Cinematheque was so instructive and broke my brain so many times. Movies I saw there that had such huge impact on who I am now as an artist.
This building is great because there are a lot of terrific different groups here with a great history of work. Video Pool has a fantastic history of great artists, as well as the Winnipeg Film Group. It gives them a chance. They have a great sound studio at Video Pool. And so for all these groups to use the access to these resources and have it be in one building, that's a fantastic resource for people who are filmmakers or writers or photographers.
I think initially it was seen that there would maybe have more of an incubator, a cooperative support for artists, and it still is, but I don't think it fully met that potential.
I'd say the one big disappointment is the fact that we never managed to find someone who would create a kind of restaurant, bar, or that kind of a communal space. We wanted a pub. Really, really looked hard for someone who would open a pub in the basement. We had a perfect space in the basement for a pub where people could come together, and there aren't a lot of communal spaces, and so so that kind of collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration that a lot of people really hoped would happen there, there isn't the space to facilitate it, and that was from the beginning a really important part of the plan that we just couldn't make happen.
And Artspace, as its initiators had imagined it, was supposed to be a place that wasn't just housing the different groups, but it was also going to be doing programming of its own, doing sort of art things that would help revitalize this part of town. And so there were some individuals who believed in the original notion of Artspace as an active body, and others, and they proved to be the majority, who wanted it to be really nothing more than a kind of a landlord providing cheap rent. And so the latter view prevailed, and a lot of I think the executive director resigned, and a lot of other people left because they realized that that they weren't going to. It wasn't going to be what they wanted it to be. It really took until the last decade and a half for that board structure to be replaced with something that was more manageable, where members who were tenants could be part of the board and the executive, but there would also be people coming in from the outside, and it was people who were interested in promoting Artspace and not necessarily any of the tenant groups. And once that got into place, then Artspace began to flourish again. It came up with some projects and more member services, and just in general is, I think, becoming a more exciting place.
We want freedom to be able to push the boundaries, try new things, have pilot projects, have, there's an openness to shutting down streets in this neighborhood that, in terms of who lives here, not necessarily the city, but that you sort of go, hey, we're going to shut down the two streets that lead to your building. Are you okay with that? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. And nobody thinks twice about it. It's like, hey, we want to have a noon hour concert that's going to clearly bleed through the windows and bleed through. Are you okay with that? Absolutely. Hey, we want to park some food vendor in your delivery sort of loading zone because there's a festival happening. Are you cool with that? Yeah, absolutely. So the answer often of either business owners or organizations or creatives in this neighborhood is often, yeah, if it brings people, if it tries new things, if it gives life to it, the answer is yes.
I feel really hopeful about Winnipeg right now. There's a lot of despites that can follow that, and we all know what those are, I think. But I do feel like I'm constantly surprised by this place still. It's still what interests me most is this city. So, yeah, I do love it.
I think that Winnipeg continues to be a place that really places a lot of importance on culture and on the arts. And it's one of the strengths of this city. It's like the trees. So we'd say, what for me makes Winnipeg such an amazing city? The urban forest and the culture. And without that, it would be like any other place. But that's what makes it unique, and it's kind of at its core, at its heart, what makes it, in my opinion, strong.
I'd say just as long as there's people, members and artists creating great works and interacting with one another, that's the importance of Artspace.
And beyond that, if you look at the rest of, the whole Exchange District is very vibrant in terms of the arts and in terms of a lot of related activity, which I don't think would have taken place without Artspace being developed.
The best thing to do with Artspace is to institute it on a solid foundation and then let it go, bearing in mind two things. First, that you do not create viable institutions in a few years. Secondly, that if it works, it will be the site of the constant conflict that always accompanies the making of the new.
Well, I interrogate every word that I ever said. I fall from buildings into angry air. Lecture my students in my underwear. But once I was allowed to dream of you instead, my dear defected fellow traveler. How you booked your final passage with a passport that you paid for with a pair of roller skates. How you dyed your hair and mustache, put on a mid-Atlantic accent, but you couldn't stop the shakes when they asked where you had come from. And you muttered that's a good one, that you were never really certain. Every umbrella down on Portman Square opens and closes to a rain